So welcome, first of all. Thank you for, again, having me in this community. I took a lot of pictures this afternoon. I gotta be honest, I might have looked like a tourist for sure. It's always snapping pictures of everything walking around. It was beautiful. Played around and had a great workshop with the youth this afternoon. We were talking about facing fear and bullies and everything, and we were rolling on mouse traps up here. Set mouse traps. So if you hear any rumors that we were setting off mouse traps on each other, they're 100% true, and I admit to it. They hurt, but the kids didn't get hurt, so that was good. Just the presenter got hurt. So tonight is sobriety puzzle. This is going to be a lot of information that I'm going to go through in a very short amount of time. Normally this is a 2 or 3 hour talk, and I'm going to try to pack it into the next hour. So buckle up. But this is a result of all the years of working within addiction treatment. So there were, like I said last night, about 30 years of counseling, and then 20 years was within addictions. So it's a lot of information to go through. And all of these examples came from people that I would see years later and ask them, how are you doing? How did you adjust? How did you not adjust? And this is all the feedback they gave me on things that helped them stay sober. Okay? So this is stuff that nobody talks about, to be honest. No counselors, like nobody presents this material. So this is going to be different, I'm hoping. So okay with it? Yep. I believe it's being videotaped right now also on Facebook. But yeah. Oh right. Yeah, you can do whatever. You're going to be co-presenting here soon for me. Okay. So, what does sobriety mean? Let's talk about that for a second. Sobriety, I heard this from the speaker, and I really have honestly tried to find who said it over the years. And I haven't been able to find it exactly. But I remember it, because it left such an impression on my mind. They said sobriety is not the absence of addiction, but it's the presence of living a good life. So, how many of you have ever seen someone that quit their addiction, but 20, 25 years later, they're still one day at a time, and I'm only gonna count on tomorrow or today, not tomorrow. And they're sort of attending meetings constantly and always talking about the triggers. And I think that's a long 20, 25 years of that sort of lifestyle. At some point you gotta really get out there and live a life instead of living in this fear of relapsing. So I really like the idea of sobriety. And like we saw yesterday on the video from Johan Hari, he said it's not even about sobriety, it's about relationships. It's about really moving on past the absence of addiction. So, I'm going to talk to you about 12 different pieces of the puzzle. These are pieces of the puzzle that sometimes nobody has, or sometimes people have all but one. There's a wide gamut, a wide variety of pieces that people will have collected or not have collected. And so, there's 12 of them. This, in no way, is all inclusive. There's probably lots of stuff that you could still add to this. There just always is. There's always new ideas and stuff to add. But this is a real attempt at trying to put together all the pieces of the puzzle of what it takes to live a sober life. And once again, these are all the things that people left and said, if only I had this, I would have done better. Or if I had this, I would have done better. Or, thank goodness I got this piece of the puzzle figured out because it saved me. Ready? The first piece of the puzzle is social. There's social connection. And, you know, you've heard this expression that says, your association, who you hang with is who you become. But they went on to find out from a psychologist here that 95%, the people you habitually associate with determine as much as 95% of your success or failure in life. So think about that. The top 5 people you hang out with. It doesn't mean that you average it out and that's who you're going to be. But there's a strong chance of who you hang with is who you become. So let's say these 5 characters in the front row with their pounding and their strong handshakes and everything, say they're bank robbers. Okay? Now we know bank robbing is not ethical and moral and it's wrong. But, you know, if I start hanging out with my homies here, and you start talking about, yeah, I remember the time I was a getaway driver, and I just peeled so much smoke out of there that the cops rushed into the bank and they didn't even see us because there was so much tire smoke everywhere. It was awesome. And remember the time that I ran in there with a big duck outfit and robbed the bank and they had no idea who I was because I was... And remember the time that I hooked up the ATM, the chains from the truck to the ATM machine? I drove down the highway, there was money everywhere. And we just they went around and they were talking about all these glory stories of robbing banks. Well, it's not going to be much longer. I'm going to have to remember to stay in here. It's not going to be much longer before hanging out with these 5 bank robbing homies that I'm going to start thinking, hey, I wouldn't mind a $50,000 payday. That sounds kind of good to me, right? It's just not going to take long. And so here we are. We live in communities where people are around a lot of influence all the time. And you know this, right? You know this. But when we ask people to go to treatment or to get them to take a look at their addiction, and then they come back to the exact same community with the exact same people, the exact same friends, is it any wonder that it's going to go back to the same, right? Things have to be radically different. So this was a big piece of the puzzle that people talked about. I could not go back home. I couldn't go back to my own community for a little while. I had to get that much stronger to confront people or to confront issues as I saw them. And I'm not a big believer in move away to a new place because chances are you're just going to take your way of thinking and your problems to a new community. But I am a big believer in if you've done hard work and made massive changes in yourself, then yes, maybe it is a good idea to go into a new community and start fresh. Then start the weekend home, start the weekend passes, come visit family, very, very quick, short little trips, and then maybe eventually you can have them coming back. But I'm a big believer in being careful around who you hang out with, your association. And I teach this to youth all the time, but it applies to us adults. They even say that this applies to your finances. Your 5 friends and their finances, chances are your finances are going to be the same. Their health challenges, chances are their health challenges are going to be the same. Like it applies to a lot of different areas of life because we become the people we hang out with. So, next one, number 2. Again, this is a big one. Where will I live? And we were just talking about that a little bit a second ago. But is the location going to be safe? Is it a safe house that you're going to go live in? Is it a positive environment, or are you going to live with somebody that's going to be, why don't you do this? And it's just constantly like at each other. That's not a safe environment, positive environment. Is it an addiction-free home? There are lots of times where one person will quit their addiction, but their spouse doesn't. I didn't sign up for this. I should be able to enjoy myself. Well, it's really triggering for me to be in the same home now that I've quit and you're doing this. And so I've heard people come up with different rules and different ideas on how to make things work. For example, the house is now addiction-free. The shed, that's your territory. Go do your thing in your shed, or do your thing with your buddies before you come home. But the house is now an addiction-free house. I remember one guy went home on the weekend, and then he came back and he was sharing how things went over the weekend. And he said, well, I went home and I made a sign, and it said, addiction-free zone. And he said, I went on the front lawn and I pounded it right into the front lawn. Big letters, addiction-free zone. And everybody in the group laughed at him, and they said, well, now you're advertising that, you had an addiction. He said, no. Everybody already knew in my neighborhood I had an addiction. Now I'm advertising I don't, so stay away. I've even seen people liberate drug-free zones from schools. And they put them on their house. Say, hey, if you're coming over with a six-pack, don't come here, because this is an addiction-free zone. Like, they've done really radical things, but it's just to send a message out there, this is now a safe place. Sometimes people need to move. They need to get into a cheerier, brighter environment, because the home they're in just isn't. And it can be tough, because, there's only sometimes so much you can do in moving around. Other times, I've heard of people gutting their whole house, painting it bright colored colors, the paint. Then they rip down all the blinds. You don't have it in here. They rip down all the blinds and they put up sheer curtains so that people can see in. And they say, I want to invite people to look in my home and see I'm not struggling anymore. I want the sunshine to come in. This is now a new home. And they rearrange their furniture. Sometimes we get into real big habits. We're creatures of habit. And how many of you can walk through your home in the dark and not stub your toe? Anybody? Yeah, I can. I even know where the creaks are in the floor. I'm like, okay, 2, on the way to the bathroom, I'm afraid. 1, 2, big step, don't wake up my wife. 3, 4, we're creatures of habit, and sometimes just by turning around the furniture in your home can be enough to break the habit of somebody that's in their addiction, because they think, oh, yeah, that's where my stash used to be hidden, but I rearranged everything, and it like catches it in the brain. Oh yeah, I don't have stashes anymore. I don't drink anymore, right? Like it's interesting what you can do in the brain to break that addiction thinking. So this is a big one. People have relapsed just because of where they live. There are too many triggers, too much history, too much past, and they had to start fresh somewhere. Do you guys have a safe house here in your community? A safe house, like somebody, either the band has purchased and it's a safe house that's addiction-free and that's where people can go to be safe for a little while, or that community members have sort of teamed up and said, this is Auntie Ruby and she's the safe house, the neighborhood sort of watch person in the community. If you want to get away from drinking, you can always go to Auntie Ruby's house. And is there any safe house here? Yeah, that might be one place to start. Is everybody agreeing that this home is going to be the safe home, and you set up a bedroom in there, and anybody that wants to stop drinking or get away from addiction, they know they can go to that home. Takes a bit of work, and there's a little bit of liability involved, but you want to make sure people are safe. Okay, puzzle number 3. This one surprised me. I'll be honest. This one actually upset me too. I can't tell you how many times I got phone calls. Ring, ring. Hey, this is so-and-so. I don't know if you remember me. How you doing, James? Good. I just wanted to give you a phone call and let you know I've decided to go back to my addiction. Like, okay, why? So first of all, why are they calling me? Why are they calling me to tell me? Anybody know?
Mom said you will stop.
Right. It's a call for help. That I'll try to help stop them. That's exactly it. Yeah. It's a cry for help. And they'll say, you know what? I don't deserve the way I'm getting treated with respect. People love me. I don't deserve it. If they only knew the things I've done, I don't deserve to be treated this well. I'm going back to my addiction. Like that honestly floored me. But it just shows how much they lived in that old lifestyle, that old belief, pushing each other down, that's where they believed that they deserved to stay. And so one of the things we would have to look at, and I implore you as community members, is when you're talking with people, don't be afraid to ask them, are you worthy of being free of addiction? Do you deserve to be happy? Don't be afraid to ask them these questions. It is something that is surprising, but a lot of people struggle with this one. They don't believe. If they only knew the things I've done. Well, that's what we wrestle with in the church all the time. I don't even want to open up, and that's for tomorrow maybe. Do you deserve to be addiction free? And definitely start to look at their core beliefs. Well, what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe you do deserve? And being open and talking with them and sitting down and having iced tea and watching the boats go by here. Like just having a good heart-to-heart talk with their core beliefs. Ask them about, are they able to be self-compassionate? Can they forgive themselves for some of the things they've done? Don't be afraid to ask. You don't have to be a counselor to ask these questions. You can just be in a good relationship with somebody, and don't be afraid to explore some of these questions. Ask about shame. Tomorrow, the sermon I'll be giving in this church tomorrow is about shame and grace. So we'll be talking about that. And then resilience. That's the other thing I've been learning a little bit about lately, is your ability to keep going despite not feeling like you deserve it. That you're resilient and you keep pushing forward. It's sort of like grit. But this is a piece of the puzzle that people went back to their addiction because this was not figured out. So don't be afraid to have these conversations with people. Next one is puzzle piece number 4, grief and loss. Normally when I talk about this piece of the puzzle, people are a little bit surprised. I don't think your community would be. Your community has been hit hard. And I am truly sorry for that. I don't know how people can even start to grieve when they keep getting hit with loss after loss. When Pastor Al told me how many losses you've had, even just since I was here last year, it just, even as a counselor, I'm like, where do you start? Like it's such a big uphill road. I remember one lady in our group, she said, I've had 12 losses in my immediate family in the last year. So she said, that's almost in essence once a month. Aunt, uncle, grandpa, child, like one a month. You're not even starting to grieve for the first one, and you're getting hit with the next one, and the next one. So can you imagine after 1 year, you're shell-shocked. When soldiers come over from wars, they had to treat the soldiers with shell shock. They were just always, their nerves were like shaking and vibrating all the time. And I imagine that would be very similar in a community like this, or with this lady. You're just shell shocked because there's so much loss. So of course it makes sense that addiction is pulling at you, or isolation, or whatever. But obviously the idea is that you want to be able to move through your emotions and not hold them in and bottle them up. That's when you start to take it out on each other. You want to be able to move. Yep, today I'm feeling sad and I'm not going to do much. I'm going to cry freely today. And I'm going to use up a whole box of Kleenex if I need to. And everybody around me knows that I'm grieving, and it's okay. So just permission to move through the grief. Work through some of the trauma. You're going to want to probably see somebody to start working through all this trauma. See a professional. Hopefully you've got some good counselors that you have access to here. And this is a different one. Your story. This is a concept that I've been learning. Every once in a while I'll get a different piece of it, but it's called revision therapy. Revision therapy. And basically the premise is that your life is a story. It's a book. The first chapter are the childhood years. What would you call it? Would you call it bliss? Would you call it run? Like, what would you call it? Then there's the teenage years. Then there's CUC years. I'm not gonna label what Joy's was during those years. Her chapter would be called. Like all the different chapters, becoming a young adult. What would you call that one? The trauma years. What would you call that? And if the years are lost right now, grief and loss, what would you call that chapter? Now here's the important part of this kind of therapy. How do you want the story or the chapter to end? Because you have the power to change the story, to write the story. So many times things come at us and happen to us all the time, and we're like, oh my goodness, my life's been crazy. But you actually have the power to start to move it, like to really control where it goes. So this idea of a story, your life is a story, it applies to addiction, it applies to loss, it applies to everything. How do you want your current chapter you're in? How do you want it to end? Or maybe you're starting a new chapter. What do you want your new chapter to be called? This next phase of my life is going to be this. What do you want to call it? Okay, next piece of the puzzle is support system, number 5. Support system. Now, often people would talk about how, man, I don't have that many friends. I don't have that many people I can call on. So here's what I want you to do. For all of you who are here tonight, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about this. You get a call. Or you're struggling either with grief or with sadness or with whatever. You're struggling and you decide to call somebody tonight to ask for help from your friends. How many people would offer to come over or to stay on the phone and talk to you? You're struggling, you're having a hard time, you call your friends. How many would be willing to talk with you or come over immediately? It might be 2 a.m. How many would come? So when you want, you can open your eyes. Somebody want to spit out some numbers at me? How many people do you think would come over? If you're really struggling. Yep.
3, 4.
3 or 4 good friends that would listen or come over. Yep. Okay? Somebody else? 3? Yep. Okay? Anybody else? Yeah? The answer that I primarily normally get is 1. 1. What that tells me is
that either some bridges have been burned over the years, or people have passed on, or left for whatever reason, or that we've been isolating and we pushed people away. So you want to think about that. Here's what I want to propose. I want to propose that you get that number up to 5 people. Because the first person you call and ask for help, I got the kids tonight, can't come over. Car's broken down, won't make it. Third person doesn't answer the phone because it's 2 in the morning. Fifth person, I'm sick, I'm not coming. Fifth person finally says, yep, I'm on my way, right? So you want to get that number up to 5 friends. And when we're dealing with people in the community, I want you to start to propose that you be one of those lifelines. Say, you know what, I want to give you permission to call me anytime. Call me for whatever reason. I will always answer. If I'm available, I will always answer. So I want you to consider yourself being one of those 5 friends, those lifelines. But sometimes it's not friends. I remember I had one person say, well, I've got lots of friends. I've got my psychiatrist, my social worker, my psychologist, my clinical counselor. I've got my doctor. And they listed off all these professionals that they've hired in their life to help them. Like, no. After 5 o'clock, none of those are available. You got to have friends. You can't just call those people all the time. And also understand that a support system, there's a difference between being lonely and alone. Sometimes you can be alone, but you're okay. You're happy, you're chill, you're all right. Sometimes when people are alone, they're lonely because they need people around them. But there's a difference. You don't always have to be lonely when you're alone. I think we really need to encourage community members to have lots of meetings, stuff like this, other kinds of classes, Thai cooking classes, underwater basket weaving, whatever it is that you've got to create in the community. Not everybody gets that one. Whatever you've got to do to create in the community, this buzz and this stuff that people can plug into that they can be part of. Always have classes, so you can build that support system. Next one, wellness. So we're halfway done. Wellness. Now, this is a concept that came from both First Nations and, believe it or not, Europe. That was foreign to most Americans. A lot of Americans, when they were doing recovery work, hadn't considered that for a person to be well, they need to look at all these different areas of their life. It's not just about being healthy. There's lots of components that make us healthy. Especially on this one, there's academic, career, social, creative, spiritual, environmental, financial, intellectual, physical, emotional. But the ones that I was taught were these 6 here. Mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social, and financial. What are the 4 areas of the medicine wheel? Anybody know?
Mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional.
Yep, that's right. That's right. This is just expanded a little bit. In India, they have 9 different areas of the wellness wheel. In India, that's been a cultural practice that they passed on. And in China, they have a lot more. Like, it's really broken down. But basically, many cultures around the world have a more fulsome idea of what wellness is rather than to just be healthy. And I think that that's important, that when we're asking somebody to leave their addiction, that we really let them know it's not just being abstinent from addiction, it's living this healthy, full life. That they need to be open to talking about their spirituality. They need to be open to talking about their culture. They need to be open to talking about their finances. Like everything. So this is an important one that we have to explore with people. You have to be open to looking at all areas of your life. Is it a balanced life? Or are you working 18 hours a day and taking 20 minutes for a walk? Well, that's not balanced, right? You want to have a balanced life. How do you spell love to children? Time. Spending time with them. So it's got to be very balanced. You got to spend time in the things that are important to you. Again, another time, I had a guy call me and say, "Hey, James, just want to let you know I've decided to go back to my addiction." I'm like, okay, why? Tell me what's going on. What's happening? I'm not having any fun anymore. So I've decided to go back to partying. Like, well, hang on, I remember your partying. You contracted a disease, you were thrown in jail, you got a lot of criminal charges, your finances were a wreck. To me, that was your partying days. Do you forget your partying days? Hey, so tell me about what's happening in your life. I'm just not having any fun. It's all about meetings and recovery and serious talks with counselors and reading books. It's just not any fun anymore. So I think it's important, and when we talk to people in the community, that we let them know you have to have fun, goof off. For me, I go on adventures once a month. If I don't, I start to go squirrely at home. And they always involve pushing the limits too much. But my wife will tell me, "James, I think you need to go on one of your adventures." Because I get growly or grumpy around the home. So I go motorbiking up cliffs and scuba diving and something dumb, and it usually involves other guys. But for me, I need to have that once a month guy fun. I just do. And other guys understand it. They're like, "Yeah, let's go blow stuff up." What is the fun? If we're asking people to quit partying, what's the fun that we're calling them to? They need to have fun. Employment, idle hands are the devil's tools. Isn't that the expression? Or something like that. I'm sure there's all kinds of other expressions, but you have to keep busy. So whether it's employment or being involved in the culture, you have to keep busy in that balanced life and making sure that you're having fun. Piece number 7, identity and purpose. Again, yesterday we talked about this grandma that retired at 65, and because she was no longer a worker that helped so many people, she lost her identity. She didn't know who she was anymore. So we need to help people find what is your purpose. If you're not going to be this person anymore, who are you going to be? Who do you want to be is the bigger question, I like. Who do you want to be? And certainly the older you get, like me, you start to ask questions like, what's your legacy going to be? What are you leaving behind? That's getting to be a harder and harder question for me. I think I'm going to talk about this. I remember my mom saying, "You almost weren't here." I'm not going to share why. You almost weren't here. You're going to be a blessing. You're going to be a blessing to people. And I remember from an early age hearing that. Not you're cursed or you're a mistake or you're whatever. You're going to be a blessing. And so as I'm getting older, I'm starting to ask myself the question, have I been a blessing? I want to fulfill that legacy, right? And so I encourage you to ask yourself this question, what legacy are you going to leave? And for the people that we're concerned about, that we want to help, asking them, hey, this might be too big of a question, but we got to remember what we're leaving behind, and there's little eyes watching and all that sort of stuff, like whatever it is that you talk about, right? What do you want to be remembered for? So, what's your legacy going to be? Your identity and purpose. Next one is an addictive personality. Now, I don't know if any of you know someone in your life, but they might have started out with a wine cooler. Then they moved on to a beer. Then they quit the beer and they went on to harder alcohol. Then they quit alcohol and they went on to cocaine. Then they quit cocaine, they went on to heroin. Then they quit heroin, they went on to crack. Or whatever, right? Like, there's always this progression from one addiction to another. And that's called addiction substitution. They're always looking for another escape, another high, another way of experiencing escape. And so if you know of people that you're working with in the community that have an addictive personality, you really need to help them understand, okay, if we quit this now, what are we going to move into where you can get your dopamine rush? What are we going to replace it with? It has to be something big and powerful. You can't just quit. You have to have something else you're moving into that is fun. I talked last night about that yoga guy, that biker, and now he's a yoga guy. Like, something that is such an excitement and a draw. It might be that you're now an elder in the community and you've got responsibilities. And you get a rush from that, right? Are you even aware of all your addictions? Yeah. Don't talk to me about, or you can talk to me about alcohol, but don't talk to me about marijuana, right? They're not willing to look at all the addictions in their life. Or you can talk to me about substance addictions, but don't talk to me about process addictions. I still like my gaming, or there's pornography or gambling or whatever it is that people might want to escape into. So don't be afraid to look at all the addictions and help people explore that. What else do you think you might be addicted to? Or if you quit drinking, what do you think you might try to gravitate towards? And let's talk about that. Being aware of all your triggers. I remember I was in a meditation and we were counting 1, 2, 3, sort of like a breathing one the first night on mindful meditation. 1, 2, 3, and somebody got up and ran out of the room when we were doing a meditation. They were really triggered because they said, back in the day, we would pass around the drugs and we would count to 5 and everybody had their turn for 5 seconds, and that's what their trigger was. Or other people have said, we can't have spoons in my house because spoons are a trigger. Like, whoa, okay. It'd be hard to eat soup, but all right. So you want to be aware of what all your triggers are and help people understand them. Hot showers can be a trigger for people. So don't be afraid to ask, hey, what's your trigger? What do you think are your triggers? And then, what's your commitment? Are you willing to look at your addictive personality? Okay, how are we doing? Any questions so far? I feel like I'm flying. And I need to take a drink and take a breath. Any questions or comments?
When I was about 16, I found I was smoking just cigarettes, and I couldn't get a cigarette. I didn't like that feeling, so I quit smoking, where I just smoked a pack a month, maybe if that.
Yeah.
And then later on, I got into marijuana, and I got paranoid on the street one time, so I quit that. But the one thing I didn't quit was drinking. So, but now I know I have an addictive personality, so I really take care. I know. So, so it's a little contrary to what you're showing, but I know that I have an addictive personality.
No, it's not contrary at all. That's exactly what I mean. Be aware of what you're addicted. I know I have an addictive personality. I do too.
But I just shake my head. Why couldn't I quit drinking?
Yeah.
We drank for years.
It's a big one, that's why.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest to quit. Yeah, smoking and alcohol are the 2 hardest to quit. Yeah. And because there's a lot to it. Like we're talking about, there's a lot of things, all the pieces of the puzzle to put into place in order to quit. And a lot of times people aren't even aware of what what they need to put in place to quit. So, yeah. Another comment or question? Okay. Puzzle piece number 9. Healthy relationships. What was modeled to me when I was young was not healthy, right? And so we grow up the best we can in the homes that we're in. We try. We do try. I really believe that. I think that our parents tried the best they could. But they struggled, right? We all do. And so it's important to realize that out there, when people are trying to quit or they're struggling with their addiction, they need good, healthy relationships to be the hook in their life. And we talked about yesterday, I think it was you talked about how relationships are key. One of you two characters over here. How we have to love on people and we have to go to them and help them. Yeah. Well, one of you. Waldorf and Stadford. Those two guys in the Muppets. So healthy relationships are really important. But what makes healthy relationships? We need to find out and learn. To ask the elders, what did relationships look like before when they were healthy? To read relationship books. I've had to take so many courses just to learn as much information as possible from everything, and to study and read the Word and everything, just to understand what healthy relationships are supposed to be. Yeah.
I had no one. A lot of us had no one to emulate because residence school, foster, everything, relocation. And I became a mother when I was 16. I had nobody to go to because our mother died when I was 13. And our elders, when we relocated, were like 20, maybe in their 20s when we. And I remember talking to an elder who has since passed, and I asked her what was it like when we moved. She said, what were you told, what were you taught? And she said, I don't remember. She said, I was busy drinking. She was in her 20s when we moved here, 60 years ago next month.
Already back then.
Yeah.
It was already eroding.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. This is the generational sins sort of are passed on, the choices. And in First Nations particularly, it was the government destroyed it. That's beyond tragic. There are no words to even describe that. Who are the healthy relationships that you emulate? The good news is there are lots now. They're starting to emerge. And they might not all be in the same community. You might have to go to different communities to find them, but there are people that are really standing up and making hard choices and being a great example to the youth. And we need to really shine a light on those people. 40 years of marriage, that's nothing to sneeze at. That should be in the newsletter here and celebrate it, right? It's those kinds of victories that you want to celebrate. Healthy relationships is an interesting one. In Kelowna, there used to be 3 tall towers, big tall towers. Now there's over 20. And they said in the next year, there's going to be another 15. So Kelowna is changing. If you haven't been there for a little while, it's now a mini Vancouver. It's suddenly got lots of time. But I love driving by these sites, these building sites, because you look down and you're like, that's a big hole. A few months later, you drive by, wow, they're still in that big hole. More months go by, they're mucking around in that hole. They got some rebar now. And you drive by, boy, that's a year later. They're still down there in that hole. And then suddenly, overnight, there's like 15 stories they suddenly built. Why did they spend so much time down there in that hole? Well, that's because that's where the foundation is being built. And that holds everything together. That's the most important part of the building project. There's one building in Kelowna that's leaning a little bit if you look at it. It was the first building built there. It was tall, and it shifted after it was built. And so they learned they had to preload the land, drive pilings down, get a much more firm foundation, and now all the buildings are straight. But the same is true in relationships. They have to be established on very strong foundations. There has to be trust, no lying. There has to be honesty. Tell the truth at all costs. There has to be great communication. You need to be able to speak honestly and freely and fight fair and all of that sort of stuff. Intimacy. I've seen a really cool spelling of intimacy, and it says, in to me see. Intimacy is in to me see. When you look in my eyes, you can see everything. And I'm not afraid of anything. There's no shame, you're seeing into me. That's intimacy. But basic building blocks for relationships, there's a lot of great books on healthy relationships. Don't be afraid to go out and buy a bunch of books and start passing them out, or audios or whatever. Have some relationship courses here in the church or in the community. Those are always good ones to have. How many have ever read the book Love Languages? Anybody? Yeah. I think that's an essential one. When you want to understand relationships, that's one you for sure should read, is The 5 Love Languages. That's actually what it's called. Let me change that right now. I can. Okay, 5 Love Languages. It's called. Well, now I've gotten to mess this up. It's called The 5 Love Languages. Okay, so definitely read that. That's a great book. I think all marriages should read that right off the bat. So next piece of the puzzle is puzzle number 10. Puzzle piece number 10. And that's mental health. I'm afraid that this one is really misunderstood. And sometimes we're so hard on people. Why can't you just quit? Why can't you just do this? Why can't you do this? Why can't... But if you truly understood what they're wrestling with, I'm not sure they can. Because the mental health has just been eroded for so long. Typically in society, there's about 3 to 4% brain injury within 100 people. There's 3 or 4%. So it might be from accidents, from violence in the past, from birthing, from all kinds of things. But mental health issues are... about brain injuries about 3 to 4%. In addiction, it's typically about 20% of the people that we see struggling with addiction, 20% have a brain injury of some kind. But I remember there was one group of women that we were really struggling with one time. It was bad. There were tink, 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 wow, fights all the time, people getting kicked out. It was just brutal. I'm like, what is going on? It's the same staff, the same program, the same building, the same everything. What's changed with this group? So we had somebody come in from the Brain Injury Society, a guy named Dana. And he did mental health, he did brain injury assessments on everybody. I asked him, look, do the whole house, do everybody. And he found that 80% of the house had a brain injury. He said, I've never seen that before in my life. He said, no wonder you can't talk about emotions at all in the house, because it triggers people and upsets the whole house. He said you have to change your entire program for this group. You cannot talk about emotions. It all has to be cognitive behavioral work. So that was a tough group. But we sometimes underestimate that it's brain injury that we're actually dealing with. And people are just self-medicating to feel good. That there's a brain injury that they're wrestling with. Or another mental health problem. You know, my ADD is out of control. I need to use this drug to calm myself down. And really, they should be switching for a good medication that's regulated and not going to hurt them. But brain injury is a big one when we talk to people in the community that we need to consider. Okay, one of the last ones, almost coping. I think it's an absolute tragedy that we try to get people to quit addiction and they don't have a healthy way of coping in place. You're just setting people up for failure. We have to examine, do you have a good way of coping, taking care of yourself? So one of the things that I would have to teach is this concept of EQ versus IQ. And I think we talked about that the other day, didn't we? I think so. EQ is the emotional quotient, the ability to self-discipline yourself, to be able to withhold. So I'll give you an example. Remind me of your name again?
Louina?
Louina? That's a pretty name. Louina, I have 4 kids. And because I'm a mean, evil, cruel counselor, I decided to do an experiment on them one time. I called all my kids, they were small, different ages. I called them all in the family meeting, and they just rushed into the kitchen. I'm like, watch this. I had a plate of cookies on the table. I said, you can have 1 cookie now or 2 cookies in 5 minutes. Now, a person with high IQ would say what? What's better than 1? 2. I'll just wait 5 minutes and have 2 cookies, right? What did my kids do, Louina? Thanks, Dad. They grab their 1 cookie and they're gone. I'm like, no! There's no EQ in my house. There's no IQ. They just grab 1 cookie and they're gone. I failed as a dad. So I did a few things in the next year, unbeknownst to them. Tried to build up their discipline, their self-discipline. So a year later, why are you laughing? I'm not that cruel. Oh, I was.
Just imagining.
Yeah. So a year later, I called them in again. Family meeting. They all rushed back in the kitchen. I said the exact same thing again. There's a plate of cookies. You can have 1 cookie right now or 2 cookies in 5 minutes. Guess what they did? No, because I worked hard. So there were some changes. Have some faith in me. No, I created monsters. My oldest daughter said, what if I wait half an hour? I'm like, oh my word, that's greedy. But that was self-control. So the lesson was taught, right? And all too often in addiction, we rush to the thing that's going to make us feel really good right now. But if I can have some EQ and say, you know what? No, for today, I'm not going to go near that. For today, I'm not. Today's going to be a healthy day. And then start over the next day. Today, no. And you keep building up. You keep building up, right? So EQ versus IQ. There's some great books on that. And how do you handle stress? There's such a thing as distress when you're always panicked, things are in the air, your anxiety's through the roof, you're distressed. But there's also a thing called eustress, which is healthy stress. It's a motivator. Tomorrow I've got a deadline, I've got to get this done, and I'm going to get it done. And it motivates you to finish whatever you're doing, and you have success. So that's discipline. Okay, last one. Look at that, we actually did pretty good. I didn't tell half the stories I normally would, because we've been here till midnight. You can thank me after. This one is called self-care. I'm surprised at how many people did not know what self-care was. Their addiction was self-care. So while we're working with people in the community, we want to teach self-care. Well, isn't that selfish? No. Selfishness is only thinking of yourself. Self-care is taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. Does that make sense? One of the things I hate getting on a plane, and they have all these announcements. One of the things I hate is when they say, in the unlikely event that the plane loses air pressure, oxygen masks will drop down from your overhead compartment, and please put the mask on yourself and then on any children. And every time in my mind, I'm like, forget that. I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. I'm putting it on my kids first, and anybody else around me, then I'll put it on myself, right? And then somebody smacked me in the head one time, and they said, no. Not physically, just, you're giving me looks here. Figuratively. They said, no, if a piece of luggage drops down and hits you, because the plane's going to be bouncing around by then, if a piece of luggage pops down and hits you in the head and knocks you out, not only are you dead, your 3 kids beside you who couldn't even reach the oxygen mask are all dead now. So they said, first, take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And I think that's actually a reason why you're here tonight. You know that you need to educate yourselves and train yourselves and be aware of all these types of things that can help your community, and you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And that is so incredibly healthy. That you want to figure out, what are the things I need to do for self-care? So, for me, it's that guy adventure once a month. What do each of you, what do you like to do that really fills your soul again, that recharges you? We know Pastor Ballott's lifting weights. That's his self-care. He's looking good. He changed in the last year. I'm impressed. He's motivating me. But what happens to anybody else? What do you like to do that is good self-care? Crafts. Yeah, just your mind melts and you're in another place. Yeah, I love that. Crafts. What's another one?
Walking.
Walking. Love walking. Oh, love walking. And it's amazing what you can set, if you're mindful on your walk, what you suddenly pick up on. The birds and the critters and the wind. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, just getting out on the water and out in nature, you know.
Yep. That water. Lloyd Walkus took me out on a boat last year when I was here. And we saw a killer whale, big one, swim right by us. And I'm like, oh, I could relax so easily on the water. It is a privilege to be on the water like this. It really is. Yeah. Okay, somebody else. What's another thing you do for self-care? Reading. Just escaping and getting a good book and absorbing yourself in reading. Okay?
Read or play a game on your phone or...
Yeah, just a mindless little game on my phone. I've got a couple, I'll be honest. I need to turn my brain off sometimes. Yeah.
Laundry.
Laundry.
I love it. It makes me,
I don't know if I-
love doing laundry. I love it. Ask them. I love it.
Okay, honestly, that's the first time anyone has ever said laundry.
I love doing laundry.
I know, right? Right?
I love it. I love folding it. I love
Wow.
it.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Just so she can have peace of mind, I have to mess the house up, so she can have it open.
Yeah. Wow.
I just love I don't use that stuff.
What do you like to do for self-care?
Just doing some projects.
The kids.
Like, we live alone now. So when we have our kids over, we don't even, we just don't even have to interact, just watching them.
The house is alive.
Yeah.
It's busy. For those who couldn't hear, just having kids over and hearing kids in the house. Just that busyness again. Yeah, our house is starting to get quiet, and my wife does not like it. She likes the busyness, so that's restorative, it's healing. For me, another one is gardening. My mom has a green thumb, and I think I'm catching it, and so are my kids, 2 or 3 of them. They all have green thumbs. In fact, when I went to rent the car here, the guy and I were talking for half an hour about gardening. He pointed me in the place of a few good seed websites, heirloom website. Anyways, we all have different self-care. I think it's important that in this community, that as a church, you figure out, or a community, whatever it is that you're here representing, we find ways to create good self-care, healing activities in the community. So whether it be walking groups first thing in the morning, and in the evening maybe after people get off work, whether it be some craft kind of activities with the elders or with whoever. I know with the kids, I hired a guy to come in, and they would go hunt, and they would skin the hides, and they would treat the hides, and they would do all kinds of crafts with the hides that they caught. The kids loved it. They felt such an immense amount of pride because of the hides. And I understand here there'd be, like smoking fish. When I was in Bella Coola last year, they made me go in their smokehouse and put all the salmon up on the rafters. And I had to build a fire and smoke the salmon for them. Loved it. There was something calming about that. I don't know why. It's assurance that you have some food. It was neat. So we need to have activities like this in the community. Do you guys have a smokehouse for the community to be able to use? That's brilliant. I love that. I hope it's used often. That's a good one.
It's fire safety right now.
It's what? It's a fire safety.
Fire ban right now across the state.
That applies to.
It's different on the res.
It's different on the res.
Different on the res,
You
yeah.
can use your smokehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be pulling that card out like crazy.
You can use it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's out in the woods and it's crisp all around, then yeah, But if it's near the water, I don't see why not. Okay, so I want you to think. We want to think about practical application now for this workshop. Have there been people? You don't yell out people's names. Biff, Gertrude, whatever, Egbert. During this workshop, have there been people you've been thinking about for different parts of the piece of the puzzle? If so, I want you to think, here's all the pieces of the puzzle. I want you to think of one that you can help with. You don't have to say their name. But yell out, well, you don't have to yell out. Call out a piece of the puzzle that you think you could help somebody with this evening. I sure would like to hear every person give like one piece of the puzzle they might be able to help somebody else out with. Yeah?
I have a question. Doesn't the person that you want to help have to want to change and get away from addiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the obvious answer is yes, they should want it. But there are ways of becoming their friend and becoming closer to them that could be established well before they even want to quit. Or introducing them to new social supports before they even want to quit. Like, there are things that you can do, I think, well before they come to that point. But it's a fantastic question, because they might say no to all of it. They might. But, you can still be a good friend. Right?
Identity and purpose.
Identity and purpose. So there's somebody you could help with their identity and purpose. That's a big one, because people just seem lost sometimes. And until you find that, that's a big one. Okay? Somebody else.
Grief and loss.
To help someone with grief and loss, they've had so much in their life that's something you could reach out to and support them. Okay? And I believe you could too. I think you have a very good presence. You'd be a good listener.
I'd be crying with them if I tried that. That's why I didn't say anything about it, because
That's fine. Just sit there and
I
cry.
don't know.
Yeah. You can both sit there and cry together. Just have lots of snot tissue. But that's either one. Listen or cry with them. Okay, somebody else. What's a piece of the puzzle you think you could help somebody else out with right now?
I like the idea of a support system.
Yeah, helping build a support system for them. And it could be in a whole bunch of different ways. But yeah, be part of their lifeline. And give them permission. Say, hey, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. It obviously means you're important to me. I don't know if I've ever said this to you before or not, but just throwing it out there, if ever you're struggling in any way, or you're having a hard time, or you're just, grumpy or whatever, I want you to think of me. I would love to hang out with you, or go for a coffee, or just talk on the phone. I want to give you that permission to call me anytime. Boy, if that call came out of nowhere, people would probably take you up on that one.
I know for myself, I turn my phone off at night, but listening to you, maybe we should leave it on all night then.
Well, I'm afraid people have called me in the middle of the night and they were in an accident or it was something serious. And I probably would give up a night once in a while of sleep knowing that I could have helped them. So yeah, that's a tough one. I would turn off those dingers for the messages. Those you get all night. But phone calls, depends. I don't know. If you go to bed at 6 o'clock, that might be too early to turn it off. But yeah. Okay. Somebody else.
To use them all.
Use them all? You think you could probably... Well, you might need to be it. You might need to be the elder in the community, the unofficial helper and support system. And there's actually a couple of you that I think would be phenomenal at that. You don't need to go to school and get an education to be a counselor. You can be a self-proclaimed listener, professional listener, and crier. I can't tell you how many stories of men bawling in the room. They would say, if it wasn't for my mom, if it wasn't for my auntie.
Yeah, do you have this stuff on anywhere, YouTube or DVDs or whatever?
This talk?
Yeah,
Oh, no, and I've been asked that multiple times.
yeah.
Because I wrote this, like nobody would have this, nobody would do this. It's just what we learned in addiction for 30 years of counseling and treatment. I really should probably get it recorded. And it's a much longer talk. There's a lot more examples and ideas. But hopefully this gave you some ideas that it's more than just, why can't you just quit?
The reason I say that, you can take your stuff and go up to our remote community and just show them some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I need to have, I know a couple of video guys that maybe we should just produce something for YouTube and then give you guys permission to go use it anywhere and everywhere, right? I don't know if this is recorded or live, but you can certainly use this talk. You have permission to use it anywhere, anytime. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes when I do this workshop, people will say, they're thinking of themselves in their addiction. They'll say, I don't have one single piece. I'm like, oh, right? Like you sort of catch your breath. But then you think, good. Then at least you know where you're standing. You got a bit of work to do. And the way I look at it, this is a to-do list. There's 12 things on your to-do list. One for every month of the year. Let's develop social for this month. That's all I'm going to work on, is working on this. The next month, I'm going to work on coping. at least you've got a to-do list. When you're on a map and you're trying to go somewhere, tomorrow I want to go find a good place to go for a walk. I'm going to pull up my map and I'm going to say, okay, Port Hardy, where am I right now in Port Hardy and where do I want to go? And then you look at all the streets that you need to hit to get there, right? How long it's going to take, all that sort of stuff. To me, this is just a to-do list on where to go and how to get there. So if you're going to move towards sobriety and wellness and health, this is the to-do list. This is how to get there. So, this is from an elder in the community, and he said, to heal a nation, we must heal the individuals, the families, and the communities, then the nation. So it all starts with ourselves, and then reaching out to our family. So the reason why you're here tonight is because you've been on a journey of healing. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You've been on a journey of healing, and you recognize that you want to help other people. That's why you're here. I hope there was something in tonight's talk that inspired you or gave you some ideas of how to help someone else. Because when we can reach out to a family member or a member of our community, you know, this room doubled next year because of your efforts of reaching out and helping people. This community would change. And right now in Canada, we need as much change as we can get. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed and righted. And, you know, we need strong community members. So I just want to thank you for coming tonight. I hope that you got some inspiration and some ideas and some practical battle plans, because I'm gonna wrap up with this last story. I like war movies. I'm becoming sensitive to the graphicness. I don't like to see blood and all that sort of stuff. I don't. But I like the idea of a battle. I don't know why. Like, courage and fight and all that sort of stuff. And I remember a historian set me straight. They one time, they said that a white flag in battle doesn't necessarily always mean surrender. It can mean a rallying point too. So they said sometimes when you're in battle, you know, you're crawling on the beach, bombs are going off, you find a foxhole, you dive in, you know, there's smoke everywhere, it's just chaos. And then when the battle settles, you poke your head up, and if there's any veterans in the room, I hope I'm not upsetting you, but you poke your head up, and you kind of got to get a bearing of where you are, right? Oh my goodness, I'm way over here. I'm in the swamps. I'm supposed to be up there on the hill. You know, oh my, I got a long ways to go. So you crawl your way out of there. You crawl all the way to the flag. And when you get to the flag, you're like, okay, am I injured? Yeah, I got shot. I got a couple injured. Patch me up. And then you're like, okay, what is it that we're supposed to be doing? Fighting. Well, I'm down to my knife. I've run out of ammo a long time ago. Well, you arm yourself back up again. Like, okay, so I'm healed. I've got my new ammunition. And you're like, what is it that we were supposed to be doing? And you look on the table and you're like, oh yeah, that's the battle plan. Right. Hey guys, come on, let's rally around this battle. Right. Rah! Charge the hill. And you're off to battle again. Right? I think sometimes by having a weekend like this, we can come together and say, okay, what's hurting in the community? Let's get some talks on addiction. Let's get some talks on mindfulness. Let's get some talks on stress and anxiety, on how to talk to the youth tomorrow night, Generation Z. Let's have some. Let's rally around and figure out what kind of healing we need. Then you say, okay, I need some new tools and some new ideas on how to reach out to people in the community. How do I need some ammunition and some battle plan ideas of how we're going to do this. And then by the end of the weekend, we're like, rah, okay, we got a bit more of a battle plan. Let's charge the hill again. We've got to win this battle. We've got to win this war. And I think when your pastor and your elders here have the foresight to see that we need to be having more talks like this, regardless of who shows up, it just took a few people to change the course of history in so many different battles. Just with a few of us, we can charge out of here and have an idea of how to help the people in our community, because their lives depend on it. And we're here to make as much support and help for those that we love. So thank you for coming tonight. Hopefully there were some good ideas in there. And man, I'm learning to really, I like you guys. I don't know if I want to go back. We still have a couple good days together, but I'm enjoying speaking with you guys. So there's a battle to win. Thank you guys.